A photograph is a two-dimensional viewing panel showing a three-dimensional world. People tend to look at a photograph and their eyes tend to wander around the image. Now, a good photographer will be able to appreciate a well-composed image and know why it's good, whereas a beginner or someone who isn't into photography may look at an image and think, wow, that looks like an amazing image, but probably won't know why and probably won't care about the why. But this is usually down to good composition. In setting up the composition, you can guide the viewer's eye through the image, drawing them to certain points and moving them away from others, ultimately telling a story. So here are a few guidelines to get you starting to think about your photos in a compositional way. Now, there are a few you'll have probably heard about, and you'll probably groan at one or two of them, and some of you might want to start commenting about this. But there might be some that you haven't heard of, or some that you might not have considered, but are equally important. So it's good to consider some or all of these at times, and other times it's good to throw them all out of the window. But if you take your time to learn these and embed them into your subconscious mind, your photography will really start to develop and you'll start seeing a vast improvement in your photos. So let's just get the most well-known one out of the way straight away. And that's the rule of thirds. Beginners tend to put the subject bang in the middle of the shot. And although sometimes this can look great, more often than not, it gives your image a slightly mundane look. With the rule of thirds, you split the image into 9 equal parts. When you put your subject on one of these lines, or you put a strong focal point on the intersections between these lines, it can really make your images stand out. So if you're photographing a landscape, try putting the horizon on the lower or upper horizontal line. If there's more interesting things in the landscape, put it on the top line. If there's an interesting sky, put it on the bottom line. If you have a person riding a bike, put them on one of the verticals facing into the photo so they have looking room in the shot. Or if you're photographing a skyline of a city, try putting the interesting building on one of the intersections. It's just a way of starting to build your shot and consciously thinking about what is going where. Now, there are many ways you can break this rule, and sometimes shooting the subject bang in the center can look really good, or shooting it in a really awkward position in the frame can make the person or the viewer feel a certain way. But you need to know about this rule and use it regularly to then be able to know when to use it and when not to use it. And if you're going to break this rule with the center position subject, make sure it's perfectly in the middle. Something just off center or not quite on the third sometimes looks a little weird and out of place. The next tool you can use to lead the viewer's eye is sharpness. By making a conscious decision as to what part of the image will be in focus and what part will be out of focus, this really gives you the control over where that viewer looks. You may want to photograph a landscape where everything is in focus, or you might want to get in close to some details and just have one part of those details in focus. So by selectively getting the thing you want in focus and pushing other parts slightly out of focus, you can really start to build further on your composition. Just don't shoot every single photo with a wide open aperture giving you that shallow focus look. Take photos with a wide aperture and then take some with a smaller aperture so you have a variety of photos in your collection. Sometimes when you're at a location, you can see lines in the landscape, and other times they're hard to find or just not there. I always look for leading lines that can help draw the viewer's eye into the shot. If you found a subject, start looking for strong lines around that subject. They can be curved, they can be straight, or even in an S-curve pattern. Just something that will basically point the viewer in the right direction. Using leading lines can be a very strong compositional technique, but are often hard to find, and you may have to really explore the subject or the location to find them. Now, you may have heard people talking about adding a foreground element, but this is only part of it. You want to think of your images as having a foreground, a midground, and a background. When done right, this will tend to give the image a three-dimensional feel. So look for a foreground element, but also a midground and a background element. Sometimes you won't get all three, and an image can look great just as a background. but it has to be pretty spectacular, or you might just get a foreground and a background that look great together. So just start thinking about foreground, midground, and background. And after a while, you'll start to see the different elements and you'll be able to put them together in a really creative way. When we're out and about or hiking to a new location, I'm always looking for shards of light or patches of light where I can get a little bit of contrast in my images, especially where the subject might move through this light. The eye tends to be drawn to the brighter parts of your image. So when you start to think of where the light is and how you can get your subject in that light, you can really draw the viewer's eye right to where you want it to be. When using colors in your shot, you need to think about how these colors might complement or contrast each other. Now, even though some colors are very different, they can still complement each other. So if we look at this image, as well as the Land Rover not being in the light, the color really blends into the background. Whereas with this Jeep, as it's red, it really stands out even though it's at the bottom left of the image. And again, this is a way of directing the viewer's eye to exactly where you want it to be. When photographing both man-made objects as well as natural things, start to look for shapes, from triangles to circles, repeating lines to parallel lines. So just start looking for shapes in your images or in potential images that you might want to take. You'll probably find that there'll be circles, triangles, or shapes hidden within that landscape or hidden within the photograph you're taking. Recomposing the shot might get this shape further in your shot or just slightly out of your shot. But it's something to think about and something to become conscious about. As long as the shape complements your image, you can really use it to your advantage and it can really help make your image become a lot more compelling. Symmetry can help in a few different ways. It can be a mirror image where one side is almost a reflection of the other. You could look for repeating patterns or having lines disappearing off to a single point. It's quite tricky to line up properly, but you can get some great images by thinking about symmetry. Now, these aren't all of the aspects of composition, but I really just wanted to introduce you to this subject. It can be very subjective, and one person may love an image, whereas another person may hate it. But if you think of these things when taking your photographs, you should start to get more compelling images. Now, it may seem a little bit contrived to start with. You may even think that you shouldn't use rules, just go out with your gut and take nice images. However, if you're having trouble with your composition, start thinking about this list of different parts of the composition and start thinking how you might be able to use them in your shot. After a while, you'll start to think of them less and less, and you'll start to incorporate them into your images naturally. And this is all part of becoming a better photographer.